So it's July 27th, and I'm simultaneously excited that MRI Safety Week is here and also saddened by the memory of what this day, in particular, July 27th, is the anniversary of. For those of you who don't know the origin stories, July 27th, 2001, pretty much at the exact hour that I'm recording this video, there was a young boy named Michael Colombini. A few days before, he had been running around like a 6-year-old boy does on a playground, and he took a header and landed on his head, and got up and showed some signs of potential concussion. So his mom rushes him to the local community hospital. They're concerned, based on her account of how significant the fall was, they're concerned that he might have a skull fracture. They do a CT study on the boy. The CT exam, the good news is it shows no skull fracture. The bad news is that it shows an astrocytoma, a brain tumor, that should it become symptomatic in his adulthood, let's just say that the prognosis is not terribly good. So they transfer him from the local community hospital to the large, previously county-run hospital, because they have neurosurgeons. They assess him. They decide that they want to do neurosurgery right away. So the following day, after they do prep and surgical planning, they cut a hole in his skull, and they go in and they remove the tumor. All indications are that the surgery went super well. Boy is going to recover just fine and lead a long, happy, healthy life. But before discharge, the next day, July 27th, before they discharge him, they're going to do a baseline MRI. They need to essentially have a picture of immediately after the surgery, so that as they do follow-up imaging over the next several years, they'll be able to recognize any changes that might be indications that maybe they didn't get all of the tumor and there's some left, they have to go back in. But because the boy is young, they're not going to do repeated CT studies on him. They're going to do MRI. Better for these kinds of soft tissue tumors anyway. So everything is in place for the boy to be discharged from a successful brain surgery, discharged from the hospital, except for this one MRI exam. So again, pretty much as I'm telling you this story, this was unfolding 25 years ago today. They bring the boy down from the patient floors down to an addition that was built onto the hospital specifically for MRI. They go into this MRI addition. The boy is agitated. There's an anesthesiologist there. They're expecting to have to sedate him. So they sedate him before they bring him into the room. Give him some Versed. And he's calm, quiet, and compliant. They move him into the MRI room and they transfer him from the MR gurney onto the MR patient table. And that jostling kind of wakes him up a little bit, and he's pushing through that initial dose of sedative. And so the anesthesiologist gives him a second dose, a little booster. They get him positioned on the table, they slide him up into the head coil, they get the little nasal cannula position, and then they're coming with the top half of the head coil down over his head, and he pushes through that second dose of sedative. So the anesthesiologist gives him another booster of sedative. He's situated. The MR tech was helping to position him, advances the table to the scanning position, and then the tech leaves the room to go get things set up to start running the scans. The anesthesiologist goes over and turns on the pulse oximeter. The boy's all hooked up, and he sees the boy's pulse ox levels are dropping. And oops, maybe we gave the boy a little bit too much sedative. So he goes over to the wall outlet where the oxygen comes out of the wall, and he turns the valve, but no oxygen is flowing. turns it this way, turns it that way. It can't get any oxygen flowing, and he's seeing the boy's O2 sat numbers slowly marching downward. So he gets the attention of the MR tech, who comes and meets him at the doorway. Hey, there's something wrong with the oxygen. I can't get the oxygen to flow. And the tech is like, who had only just started at this facility a couple of months prior. The tech is like, there's something weird with the oxygen here. There's another tech working who's been working here a couple of years. I've only been here for a few months. I'm going to go ask the more senior, more experienced tech. So she goes, asks the more experienced tech. He says, yes, in fact, there is something weird with the oxygen system. If you don't know how to address this, now's the time for me to teach you. So the two of them go into the MR equipment room, which is essentially soundproofed from the rest of the MRI suite. They don't tell the anesthesiologist that they're doing this, and the anesthesiologist is yelling to the techs, hey, is it fixed? What's going on? And he's still watching the patient's O2 sats slowly march downward. And he's becoming a bit anxious about this. If they don't get the oxygen system fixed soon, this could be a problem for the patient. So he's yelling to the techs to get a status update, but they can't hear him because they're inside a soundproofed room. At around this moment, a nurse who had left something attending to a patient earlier that day who had come to MR, the nurse had left something, and she came back to MRI to retrieve whatever it was, a chart or who knows what. She lets herself into the MRI suite, and as she's going back towards where the scanner was, she's hearing the anesthesiologist yelling, he thinks, to the technologists, hey, my patient's desatting, I need oxygen. And the nurse remembers that when she was down there earlier that day, she saw some portable oxygen tanks. She can't remember exactly where it is. She goes looking, and she finds them in a little alcove across the hall from the doorway into the magnet room. She picks up one of the portable oxygen cylinders, and she meets the anesthesiologist in the doorway. The anesthesiologist takes the cylinder from the nurse, turns around, takes a couple of steps into the magnet room, and boom! The magnetic field of the MRI scanner grabs the steel oxygen tank out of the hands of the anesthesiologist, and it flies into the magnet, and it hits the boy on the way in, and it goes past the boy, but then the magnet pulls it back in again and comes back and hits the boy at least one more time. The boy who just the day before had his skull cut open for brain surgery, and the oxygen tank hits him in the head and the face repeatedly. The boy winds up dying about 2 days later as a product of the injuries from that accident. That accident, that boy, Michael Colombini, that accident triggered contemporary MRI safety. There was information and guidance available prior to that accident, but it was kind of here and there, hit and miss. That accident prompted the ACR, the American College of Radiology, to form what became an MRI safety committee, and authored what has subsequently been revised, renamed into the ACR Manual on MR Safety. That document today represents the standard of care with respect to MRI safety. Anyway, for those of you working in radiology, in healthcare, I encourage you to take this day, July 27th, and the rest of the week, which we now recognize as MRI Safety Week, a recognition that I began 22, 23 years ago. I encourage you to take this week and rededicate yourself to MRI safety. Anyway, I hope you have a safe and productive MRI Safety Week, everyone. Let me know how you're recognizing MRI Safety Week at your facility.